I could walk 6 houses away was Thelma Gibson. I grew up in the house that Ted Glover's family used to be in when he first got married. He was a cousin of my mother. Randall Fox, the school isn't named after him, but Randall Fox is my mother's baby brother. L. Walton Young was my grandfather's cousin. Cleveland Eunice was one of my father's closest friends. He was also a dentist.
Let me shake your hand, man.
You know, you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Carlton Francis lived just down the bottom of the hill. That's Percy Francis' uncle, and you know, he was just down the bottom of the hill. And you could go to these people. You could go to them. You had a problem. You had a problem in school. You need some help with your homework, English or language or whatever it is. You could go to them. Naomi Blatch was one of my teachers. And on and on and on and on.
And these people names I just know, you know, schools I just see. I mean, yeah. I'm actually in awe. You taking me back, Jackson, you know, as you talk about them. I'm trying to envision it myself. But I want to talk a bit about architecture. Yeah. I know too much about architecture, but I did know one time in high school, in junior high, I thought I would have been interested in architecture, so I started out with the technical drawing, with the T-square and the rest of that sort of stuff. I did it for a period of time, but how did you get to jump into architecture? Because my brother Percy, actually, who worked with you a few years back, he went on and he fully pursued it, you know, but I just did a little bit. But I know from he was young and he was drawing, we always knew either he was going to be an artist or an architect, because from young he always could have draw straight, draw angles and that sort of stuff. So when did you realize that you was going to jump into architecture?
Well, I didn't until much later. I mean, it's interesting. My grandfather was a mason, a stone mason, and he used to have me working with him from the time I was a little boy. Because, you know, I always wanted to do things. So my job was to follow around on the job sites, picking up nails and straighten out nails. We didn't have the abundance that you have today.
Yeah, I actually know about that.
So,
too.
yeah, okay. So, you know, you get a little can, a little paint can, and you fill it with nails, and you spread them out on the rock.
You bomb it with the hammer.
And you bomb them with the hammer and straighten them out.
You hear that word bomb. So
yeah.
That's from the old school. Bomb it.
Yeah. So you know a little something about bombing. But so that was how I started, you know. And the same paint can I used to fill with sand and move sand. Sometimes you tell me, move that heap over there, move that heap over there.
Wow.
You know, and quite honestly, I'm sure he didn't need the heap moved, but he wanted me to have a discipline.
Wow. That's the key.
Of seeing a job. Man, I can't move all the sand. How you can move it one bucket full at a time? And to learn, you know, that you eat an elephant one bite at a time, you know, and to move it from one place to the next. And when you get that whole heap, move on the other side of the yard, move it back on the next side. But what you're learning is an achievement. So I had this. He was my grandfather. I'll come back to him in a minute. So then I went to university and I was doing this physics course. And I met a young man who was going to Columbia to study architecture. And he said, boy, you draw so well. And he asked me to help him with the physics homework. And he said, you have such a grasp of mathematics. And, you know, you'd make a good architect. So I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So we talked about it. I said, well, where are you going to school? He said, I'm going to Columbia, and I just finished at the University of Pennsylvania. I said, oh, yeah, well, so why aren't you going to school at Penn? So he said, because I couldn't get in. So I said, why you couldn't get in? He said, well, because that's the best school right now to study architecture. I said, okay, I go in there. He said, man, you know, you gotta apply. Have you applied or something? I said, no, I'm just hearing about this thing. Make a long story short, I went over to school to tell the people there at the school that when I was finished with Lincoln, I was coming to Penn. So the lady told me, say, well, it doesn't quite work like that, son. First you have to apply. So I said, well, you know, what does it take? Anyhow, I found out I had to make an application. I went back to the university and I used to wait on tables in the faculty dining room. So I ended up going to the president's house for a special reception as a waiter. My experience in the hotels here taught me how to serve, how to be of service and how to serve and to pass the drinks around and so on and so forth. So
What you were telling me is the typical format of developing a leader must first serve. I listened to, and that's what makes you such a great leader today.
well, I mean, take it easy with the compliments, but because you're still under construction and until the end,
Okay.
So I'm still working on this Jackson Burnside that I want to be. So I went there, and the president pulls me over when the reception is over, and he said, "What are you going to do with yourself when you graduate? Aren't you graduating the next spring?" So I said, "Yes." So I said, "Well, what you going to do with yourself?" And he said, "I'm going to the University of Pennsylvania." I said, "Oh, great." He said, "Well, what are you going to study?" I said, "Architecture." He said, "Oh, so you got into the school already?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I mean, what did you study here to get you into school? Aren't you in biology?" I said, "Yeah, I'm in biology and mathematics." I was painting. I was taking a lot of extracurricular courses in different disciplines. And it just worked out that they all ended up being prerequisites that the University of Pennsylvania accepted. And they liked the variety of background. They liked how diverse my background was. So I asked the president if he would write my recommendation. And he said, "Jackson, I'll do one better than that. I'm playing tennis with the dean of the School of Architecture
Wow.
on Saturday." And the rest is history.
Yes. Wow.
I got into that program, and then I went and I studied with a man by the name of Lou Kahn, who at the time was America's #1 architect. He was a leading architect.
Lou Kahn?
Louis I. Kahn.
Okay.
If you look him up, you'll see his work.
Most definitely.
And he took me around the world. The projects, I worked on projects in Tel Aviv, in Iran, Tel Aviv, Israel, Iran, Ahmedabad, India, Abbasabad in Iran. And the classic was I worked on the national capital of Dhaka.
Wow.
Bangladesh, at Dhaka.
Man, I didn't know you were so highly decorated, man. I feel like I out of my league.
And in addition to the Graduate Theological Union Library at Berkeley, California, and the School for British Art and British Studies at Yale University. So I got a really wide exposure there. And then he died, and that took me to England, and I worked for Ove Arup, which is a internationally famous engineering company for the most part. But they had a division that designed buildings, and they hired me. And I was only there for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, before the bottom fell out of the British economy in 1976.
Well, he was, but I was only like, but 1A.
Yeah.
Or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but these are the guys that did the Munich Stadium in Germany for the Olympic Games. They did all of the engineering for the Bird's Nest and the water cube in Beijing recently. They do a lot of that kind of work. They did the Sydney Opera House. In fact, the Sydney Opera House had just been finished, and the models, special structures unit, which really fascinated me, was just downstairs from me. So all of Father Magnus at Archimedean polyhedra at St. Augustine started to kick in, and all this geometry started to kick in, and I was really fascinated by that. But
how was the experience of being exposed to all this stuff? How you felt as Jackson Burnside? How you felt as a human being?
I still didn't, I didn't feel Jackson Burnside knew anything or